on page 238, I believe.
Thank
or
you.
237, I'm not sure.
Okay, last time we did the first Mishnah attributed to Hillel, that one should be amongst the students of Aaron, which is Mishnah 12 in my book.
Right.
No, I don't think we got any further than that.
I would follow you. I agree. Sometimes I forget.
Well, yeah, I don't think we did the next one, but we'll find out. If it sounds familiar, you'll let me know. All right. So just to sort of recap a smidge, we have here in the Mishnah a series of 3 passages, all attributed to Hillel, which in some ways recognizes the central and significant role that Hillel had in the life of ancient Israel, and the fact that he is the first in a chain of patriarchal leaders of the Jewish people, most of whom are named Hillel and Gamliel. So gets a smidge confusing. You just have to identify which generation Hillel and which generation Gamliel you are speaking about. And in the first Mishnah, what we saw was sort of the emergence of a new model of Jewish life, and one in which it, depending on your predilection, either subverts or inverts the role of Aaron, who biblically was the Kohen Gadol, the person who brought sacrifices on behalf of the people and therefore brought the people closer to God. But in our Mishnah, he is seen as someone who brings people closer together, and through that brings them closer to the study and practice of Torah. And if you will, his role as a religious leader is sort of moved to be that of what we would think of more as a rabbinic function and less of a priestly function. Okay. And generally speaking, our Mishnah, that first Mishnah, suggests that we as individuals have a responsibility to others in our society, and that the well-being of any member of the society is tied to that of the whole, and that the well-being of the whole is in some ways reflected in how any one person in the society is treated. That was sort of a quick summary of that Mishnah. The second Mishnah has certain uniquenesses, not least of which is that it is entirely in Aramaic. As we, I think, touched on last time, Aramaic was the common language of the Jewish people for many centuries. It is, and was certainly the common language spoken by the majority during Hillel's time. And part of what we're seeing perhaps here is the fact that this was a little snippet of folk wisdom that was preserved in its original, because there was not a concern that people wouldn't understand it. And it had a certain rhythm to it that flowed better in Aramaic. So let's see what he has to say here. Hillel also used to say, one who exalts one's own name will only degrade one's name. One who fails to increase knowledge will only decrease it. One who fails to study deserves to die, and one who abuses the crown of Torah will surely perish. Right? In the English, it doesn't have the same lilt and rhythm that the Aramaic has. Okay? But let's break up this Mishnah and see what he's trying to tell us.
Which Mishnah are we?
I'm looking at Mishnah number 13.
13. Okay.
Yeah. He also used to say, Negad Shema Avad Shemei. And you can see just in that one sentence how there's a sort of a alliteration and rhythm that the English does not capture. Okay, so the question is, why might someone who strives to glorify their name end up degrading it? Or perhaps phrased a little differently, how does one earn a good reputation?
Well, if someone is worried about his own renown, then he won't be concentrating on increasing his knowledge of Torah, right?
Well, maybe not. But let's not tie them together yet.
Okay.
Because theoretically, someone could be, a great pursuer of Torah with the goal being, I want to be known as the world's greatest Torah scholar. In the same way that, do you remember Peanuts?
Yep.
Not the food, the Charles Schultz characters.
Yeah.
Well, there's one in which Linus declares that his ambition is to be the greatest world famous humble little country doctor. So
a contradiction in terms.
It's a right, exactly. So theoretically, one could be a tremendous scholar of Torah, but if the goal in becoming a scholar of Torah is to be known as the greatest scholar of Torah, then perhaps you haven't mastered the essence of Torah quite as much as you think you have. So what is Hillel's concern here about someone who seeks to glorify their name?
Well, that's a purpose that's sort of cross, with reading the Torah for the purpose of the good life or the right life to live or to.
Again, let's divorce it for a moment from the question of Torah. Arnie.
I think there was a German philosopher who said that your greatness is your godliness and your nothingness is your humanness.
Your greatness is your godliness and your humanness is your, interesting. And
I like the two because don't get lost in who you are, but always remember what you're not.
Okay, so so if you are to take it very out of context, perhaps. So if you are a great hockey player, is that a reflection of your godliness?
Being not from Canada, I can't answer that.
Okay, well, perhaps I'll put it in a cultural term you'll understand. Baseball player. Baseball player. Is being a great baseball, basketball, other athletic star make you, is that an expression of your godliness? Is that what the philosopher had in mind? Rhoda?
It would be if that person would use their favor among people to support and get other people to support people who are in need.
Okay, so then, but that's not, I don't think that's what the philosopher meant by that being your expression of greatness.
Can you repeat what the philosopher said? Your greatness is your godliness or have
Your
irony
everythingness is your godliness, and your nothingness is you being
nothing.
human.
Thank you.
The idea, like the reason I have put that, I remember that, Rhoda, and I remember the rabbi even told me that, is it gives you a sense of balance. Okay, when you're a freshman in college, you know everything. The more you progress in college, the less you know. So when someone says, I know all of Torah, I'm smiling, because who really knows all the whole knowledge of Torah, much less a lot of other things. We have our weakness, and that makes us to some degree human. And I think it also we lose some of our hubris in being lost in, do you know who I am? I'm the great me. And I won't go political on
Well, I'm the even greater me, so there you go.
Are you a greater me than me?
Absolutely.
I thought you were my mini me.
No, mini me lives in my office.
Well, really, what
And he doesn't come out unless I have my hand stuck up his.
Okay. Oh,
Well,
I thought you're a ventriloquist. Okay.
Occasionally.
you're seeking renown and to be the best of everything, then you're depending upon all the rest of the people to acknowledge that you are the best in everything. So you're looking outside of yourself really for your satisfaction or your worth or
Your
what have you.
validation.
Validation, yeah.
Okay.
Very good, Tim.
Yeah, Rhoda.
I also remember the phrase about you should always strive to be the best that you can be, not what someone else can be. You have to be yourself.
Yeah, no, it's the sort of the old thing about, Zusha, who's, at the end of his life and worrying about standing in front of God, and, his students try to reassure him, and he's going like, I'm not worried that God's going to ask me why I wasn't more like Moses or Akiva or
Exactly.
whatever. It's like, why weren't you the best version of Zusha you could be? And, do I have an answer for that? That's the specific story I think you were alluding
Exactly that one. Thank you.
to. Yeah.
Rhoda, I would add to that. I think we have role models, and we aspire to be like that role model. Yet here's some of the areas that distinguishes me from that role model. It's like your hero. You know a lot about an individual if you know who their heroes are.
But you don't strive to be that hero in full, but you have to still be true to yourself.
Correct. And for some
Yeah,
people, it's hard to do.
Yeah,
They get lost in the hero and don't realize who they are.
It's about emulating certain of their qualities, attributes, skills, perhaps, but stepping into them is impossible. And I think there's also an element of concern here on the part of Hillel that in the pursuit of glory, in the pursuit of aggrandizing one's name, what are the things that one might be willing to make compromises about? Do I worry? Do I allow myself to be a little less honest with myself and others? Do I worry not so much about the dignity of other people who I may be stepping on in order to gain my glory? And perhaps
that's a good one. That's a very good one, because they're individuals who use other people beneath them to make them look good. It's sort of like sometimes a chairman of the committee will take all the credit for everything the committee did. The chairman did little, if anything.
Whereas the people we tend to esteem more are the ones who will be much more quick to share the credit for what has been accomplished.
I had another slant on that, Rabbi. Apologize.
Please, go ahead.
The difference between the public self and the private self. James Bond is James Bond, but Sean Connery was just Sean Connery. And he wasn't exactly always James Bond.
Yeah, and he wasn't always a mensch either.
No.
I don't know what that.
Yeah, that is true, especially when we're dealing with people who have gained their renown in realms where they play other, at times even heroic characters, and they themselves as individuals are lesser than the characters they portray. Yeah. And then there are times when people are put into situations where they almost surpass the epic character. There was a recent show that was on called Superman. It was all about Christopher Reeve and what he accomplished after his injury. And you saw the real heroism and nobility of this man really glow. I mean, there's no other way to describe, but so he went from playing Superman, who was sort of this epic hero, to being in many ways a much more accessible and emulatable and inspiring hero.
Good example.
So
that's the whole thing of media today. I mean, it's what gets the attention, what gets put into on the TV or the movies or what have you. It's the power of the media to do that, but it's not. The end result is not necessarily great for you.
Mm-hmm. And I guess part of it becomes the question of, all right, so most of us don't live our lives in the media or in the public spotlight. And so how do I play this out in my own life in a way that allows me to garner for myself a good reputation? And in many ways, it's by leading a good but sometimes very quiet life. And one in which, and this is a quote from, what's his name? Jonathan Sachs. Thank you. Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, of blessed memory, who said, a good name is acquired as an after effect, not as a goal.
Isn't that based upon three names, that you're born with one name, your friends call you by another name, is the name you make for yourself?
Yep. But the one you make for yourself is, how deliberately am I doing it, or how much of it am I simply recognized for, not because I was striving for it?
Okay. Good point.
Rhoda? You're muted.
Could you repeat Jonathan Sachs' words? And a good name is acquired.
A good name is acquired as an afterthought, not as a goal.
Thank you.
It's a great quote.
It is. He said a few pithy and wise things over the years.
Yeah, I have this book, Essays of Jonathan Sacks. It's brilliant.
Yeah, he was a bright fellow. Didn't always agree with him about certain things, but one learns from everybody.
Right.
And you never know when you're going to learn the thing until you read it, and then you decide whether you'll agree or disagree. But at least makes you think a little bit. He was not always especially fond of those of us outside of the Orthodox world.
Okay.
Okay, but let us move on to the next part of our Mishnah. Udala Mosif Yusuf. Right? Again, you feel the alliteration and the rhythm in the Aramaic, and here he says, one who fails to increase knowledge will only decrease it. So he's, I think, asserting here the idea that learning is supposed to be a lifelong process.
Yes.
That if one begins to lose one's intellectual curiosity, one becomes less interesting, is how I would state it. After all, don't we really enjoy most those conversations with people who are thoughtful and make us think?
I like that.
I think you put that's a good point too, because to think, how do we think? What's the pedagogy of thinking? Do we really think about thinking?
Do we think about thinking?
I mean, and it's something you have to do, not somebody else. So I saw this book one time. It's called Teaching Johnny to Think. It was quite good.
How do we teach Johnny to think?
Well, I can't go into it right.
Okay.
Don't get me wrong, but the fact is that, you know, you use I don't know, you use a broad outline in terms of what are your first principles and what is the how do you know what you know kind of thing, the epistemology of it, and then there's the ethics and the politics and the aesthetics that all come into it. And so I mean, it's not just one little snippet of a thing, but it's a question of where does this idea that somebody or a conversation, does it resonate with me as something that is right or wrong, or does it, you know, it's not something that jumps out. Sometimes you can talk to people and you can figure, well, wait a minute, that doesn't sound quite right. And you think about it a little bit and you say, well, yeah, that's why I don't think it sounds right, because it's not right in this particular way. So you just can't think all the time, for sure. You have to act. But
Well, yes, not to mention that really thinking can give you a headache.
Well, my theory is that your brain is always doing its thing, and the question is whether or not it gets out to your consciousness in terms of being able to express it, or is it backstop? You know, is it stopped somehow by the things that you probably don't want to be known for, to do, or what have you, some pleasure or what have you.
Oh, and part of it is, you know, if we're going to think seriously, study new information, you know, new knowledge theoretically can be transformative, right? But only if I'm willing to allow it. If I'm not ready to be transformed, then that knowledge becomes, I don't want to say theoretical, but it's it hasn't been
It's made an-
internalized
Right.
completely
hasn't
yet.
made an impression. Doesn't.
Yeah, Arnie.
Everybody here is old enough to remember a dial tone. Where we
Yes.
used to dial the phone. Somewhere along the way, we had to learn push button system. You went out and bought yourself the latest phone because it's got all the gadgets on there, and all of a sudden you learn to do something else. It helps you in your daily life in terms of what's behavior, in part because it's also necessary to you connect with other individuals, which is one. The other one is number two, which is Sam. One of the things I love about Sam is because he makes me think, and he'll always say the question, how'd you arrive at that particular conclusion? Which I like. But part of that also is, yes, you do study thinking because it's how you're doing something, and maybe you're thinking in the wrong way, not in terms of the conclusion, but your process of thinking. In other words, there's certain times where I have to draw an inference as opposed to everything is there. There's the inductive leap. And so much I have the facts up to a point, but how much am I willing to take the leap to get to a certain point in time? The third one here is thinking in terms of exposure. I like exposing myself to different things. Why? Because I haven't seen that one before and I haven't thought about it before. That's why I want to explore it. But I'm not exploring it with a closed mind. I'm trying to explore it with an open mind to be receptive to it. All right. It's almost like telling a child, try this. You might like this. No, I just want French fries. All of life is French fries. I don't want to try anything else.
That's me. Jody will tell you, I'll eat French fries 3 times a day if you let me.
Well, you know what I meant though, Rabbi.
Absolutely. And that's part of why, this came out in a conversation with Daniil and a couple other people, which is I don't always love teaching stuff I've taught before, because I'd rather teach something that I haven't taught before, because I want to be able to sort of study it as opposed to just, okay, I know this, I can repeat it, rinse, lather, repeat.
The trouble with that is rinse and lather is is that what you talked about before? Let's take love thy neighbor as I love thyself. I'm sure you've got a sermon on there somewhere that you've done that. Okay. So the question is, why don't you look at it again to see if there's a new way in 2025 to present it?
Well, and I do. I won't say that I don't ever look back at my stuff, though I oftentimes look back at stuff and go like, I can't believe you said that in public. But and every once in a while I'll come across and go like, oh, that was a goodie. But more often than not, I'm going like, you said that in public. What a yutz. But and part of it was, one of my first real Talmud teachers made a habit of always teaching something new, some tractate, something that he had not studied before, so that he could, quote, have the experience of studying it with us. And he would walk into class sometime and go like, I spent like 90 minutes trying to crack this little passage by the Tosafists. And you would go, oh, I feel so much better because I spent 4 hours trying to crack it and I didn't get it. But when your teacher, who is the expert on it, says, that was really hard and it took me 90 minutes, all of a sudden your effort felt validated, affirmed, and it's like, oh, it wasn't easy. And it just felt different. And he talked about how that's part of what he wanted students to experience, that it didn't just become instantaneous just because he'd been studying Talmud for 40 years or 30 years or whatever.
think the chief, I mean, you have to ask yourself, what is the chief value that you're looking for? What's the problem that you're trying to solve? What is that at the time? Or the big issue that is what, ask yourself, what is your chief value in life? And people will say lots of different things. But your chief value is your life. If you don't have your life, you don't have anything. I mean, that's the obvious part, but also a life is more than just being biologically alive. It's being able to get along in the atmosphere, in the environment that you are, to solve the problems, just like ancient people had to solve how to stay alive, how to do this, how to do that. And
It's a sum total
Yeah.
of everything that you are and do.
right. So if you're driven by the pleasure you get by someone saying, "Oh, you're such a great guy," or so whatever, then what does that do for your life? What does that do for you to help you learn something about the reality of the thing? I mean,
Well,
it's just a sentiment that they say, or they may be very truthful about it, but at the same time, is that what you're seeking? Is just have someone
Well-
tell you what a great person you are?
Well, I think in the first one, it's the warning that that's not what you should be.
Right.
In another way, if in fact you encounter people who affirm that which you've done, not because you were looking for the affirmation, but you can take that affirmation as an impetus to repeat or do something more.
Yeah.
I guess it goes in part to the question of intent. If my goal in doing it was not to get a slap on the back and praise, if I get it, that's nice. And, that might make me feel good and might make me want to do something positive again, even if that's not completely why I'm doing it.
Yeah. I've always thought that, I haven't always thought this, but I've come to believe that if someone could tell me, hey, you could do this better, or this is wrong, that's a help. That's a good thing. I learned something.
That's true, but it doesn't really depend on how the person presents the correction.
Yes, and
There's also a piece with regard to
depending
Sam.
on how you receive that, whether it's nice or not, what have you, try to objectively say, okay, does this person have a point there? You don't automatically reject it because it's said in a
Well,
bad,
but oftentimes
way.
oftentimes if it's presented in a particularly harsh way, people will ignore it because they won't accept the legitimate critique that's hidden under the nasty language.
Right.
Arnie, you had a comment.
Yeah. Sam, you and I've talked about this before, and Rabbi, we've talked about it as well. The concept of premature closure. I got a piece of lumber from Home Depot. It's going to be for my desk. I don't do anything with it. Why? It does exactly what I want it to. It's a piece of lumber. I'm going to use it for my desk. And somebody said, you ought to sand it. If you sand it, it'll be much smoother. Then along comes somebody else and says, you need to do something else to finish it. It'll bring out all of the burls within the wood, et cetera, and it'll be a much better piece. The trouble is with regard to thinking is that we have a thing called premature closure. We close it early without realizing there's more to think about or there's another approach to it. And the problem is a lot of people think there's only one approach to making eggs, which are expensive these days. There's somebody else thinks there's another approach, which may be better, depending on how you view it and what you're used to and comfortable with.
Yeah, but the enemy of good enough is perfection. So I mean, you don't want to spend all your life. What's your goal? Is to build the deck. Not to define the idea.
But a thing can become functional and still be enhanced over time.
It can.
You know, so and sometimes you just create a thing to be functional. You know, in our previous houses, we had many middle of the line IKEA shelves.
Okay.
They were not top of the line IKEA shelves. They were middle of the line IKEA shelves because I wasn't prepared to spend the money on top of the line IKEA shelves, given the quantity of shelves that I needed, right? But they literally lined two sides of our garage and a wall and a little bit of our basement. And they were incredible storage for all the stuff that we probably didn't need, but kept anyway. But we kept it in a neat and organized way. Now, theoretically, I could have sanded and finished the shelves. My only willingness to invest in them was to put them together and make them functional.
I know.
All right. Now, on the other hand, if they had ended up in the house as opposed to the garage and the basement, I probably would have bought nicer shelves and or gone through exactly what you described, Arnie, as I'm going to enhance them to make them not just functional. So sometimes our goal it defines the limitation that we impose on a thing.
The other, what you determine is the importance thereof. In other words, your shelves down in the basement were important up to a point. The shelves, if you put them inside your office, they were important at a different level.
Correct. Okay, let's press ahead because I do want to make sure we finish this Mishnah. All right, the next line is potentially more challenging. Udalaya leif katla chayav. One who fails to study deserves to die.
Which one is that, Rabbi? No, that's
Udalaya leif.
which is 13 or
I'm still in Mishnah number 13. I'm in the fourth line of the Aramaic, the way it's laid out in my book.
okay.
Udalaya leif katla chayav.
Okay.
Right?
He who does not learn.
One who fails to study deserves to die. Right?
Deserves.
It feels a little harsh.
Yeah, that's true. He who does not learn Torah altogether, death he deserves, I guess is the translation here.
Okay, well,
Same thing. I mean,
he's introducing the whole question of the study of Torah, which, by the way, is not in the original anywhere. You know, the other one is essentially it talks about knowledge. It doesn't specify Torah. Your translator is introducing the idea that it is the study of Torah, and if you don't study any Torah, you're a waste of time and space, and you should just die.
Yeah, I just noticed that.
Kind of harsh.
In brackets, Torah altogether is in brackets, so it wasn't.
Yeah, because he's at least acknowledging the fact that it's not actually there and it's implied.
Right.
Now, and it may very well be that for Hillel, knowledge and Torah are synonyms, and that if you're not engaged in the study of Torah at all, then what's the point of you? Which is kind of harsh, especially when you think about the fact that Hillel was sort of by reputation known for being something of a kindly fellow. You know, it's like the classic and famous story about, you know, the person who comes to Hillel after, goes to Shammai, asks to convert, and Shammai basically chases him away, and Hillel welcomes him warmly and says, and so that reputation for warmth seems a little bit at odds with that rather harsh statement. Bill?
Rabbi, I was thinking with this comment here about you must learn or you die. Would that be in any part connected to the various levels and branches of Judaism? Partly because of the study aspect, people branched off from the original Orthodox into the extreme Orthodox, the conservative, the Reform, and the other groups?
I mean, well, remember, in the time of Hillel, that was completely irrelevant. Remember, those are creations of modernity. For Hillel, there might have been two categories of Jews. There was sort of the rabbinic community who were heavily engaged in the study of Torah in one form or another. And you had what the sages called Amei Haaretz, which literally means the people of the land, right? But Am Haaretz, which in its literalness means a person of the land, was not used as a neutral descriptor or a compliment. All right. You ever see the movie Blazing Saddles?
Mm-hmm.
It's a Mel
No,
Brooks
bro.
classic. Yeah. All right. And at one point, the Gene Wilder character is trying to console the black sheriff who has sort of gone into town and not been welcomed warmly. And he tries to reassure him and says to him, remember, these are simple people. These are the people who are building the new West. These are ordinary, simple folk,
right.
The common clay of the new West. Morons, right?
No,
That's kind of the way the rabbis thought of Amei Haaretz. Calling someone an Am Haaretz was not a compliment. It meant you were unworthy.
Rabbi,
You were a waste because you weren't studying Torah.
Rabbi Booth, a former rabbi, used to call it the gum chewing public.
The gum chewing public.
The way he put it.
Yeah. Yes, but I resent that because I occasionally chew gum.
At any rate, but in Hillel's and Shammai's time, it would have been like a culture that was being strongly influenced by the Greeks, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So
So there may have been a difference in the sense of someone who studies Torah, like the rabbis, versus and see the importance of something versus a more less, I don't know, interested public that
look,
who are Jewish, but not necessarily.
it's the ordinary folk. The difference is that in the rabbinic model, ordinary folk are students of Torah, right? And that I don't know, it certainly wasn't true universally in the time of Hillel. And I don't know that it was ever universally true in the life of the Jewish people, but it was certainly aspired to in some ways in parts of Eastern Europe where you had people who by profession and trade would study Torah together at an opportune time in their workday. So you had the milk carriers Mishnah study group 104. And when did you do this? Well, you did it after you delivered your milk and before you went home, right? In the same way that there are business people's study groups, Torah study groups that often meet in law offices or in other offices in order to afford people who are doing it over lunch, because that's when their break time is during the day. But I think it would certainly not be inappropriate to suggest that the universal study of Torah is aspirational on the part of the rabbis. I don't know that it has ever been fully realized, regardless of which Jewish stripe you happen to be associated with. Without naming names, I have there's someone that I grew up with who became a member of an Orthodox congregation, and would go, to the rabbi's class when encouraged. But if you asked him, he would. I go for the snacks. They were mediocre snacks at best, but he would sort of be the first one on one level to admit that it was too much thinky going on, and that was just like, and my mind just doesn't work that way. So he would show up occasionally because he sort of felt this pressure to be part of the study culture of the congregation, but as a personal commitment to study, not so much. Okay, so if I want to tie it to this statement to part of our previous reflection, if it's in fact that one who is not actively learning as part of a lifelong process, someone who loses their intellectual curiosity, becomes somewhat, at least intellectually, dead, and maybe that's an easier way to stomach that that statement.
Yeah.
Rhoda?
The fact that it says one who does not study deserves to die, maybe that is a way of saying if we as Jews do not continue to study, our way of life will go. We won't be able to know what it is. We don't have this contact with God.
That's a wonderful little drosh. I don't know that that's what the statement meant, but it's a wonderful drosh. So let's stick with it, because there's a truth there, which is those who are not actively engaged in the study of Torah during their lives will tend to dissociate from Judaism, because what keeps them there? If your Jewish learning curve peaked at the age of 12 and a half, there's not a whole lot of there that's necessarily going to keep you Jewishly attached, involved, and committed. Okay. In the last couple minutes we've got, let's finish up the Mishnah so we can start fresh with the next one next time. U'de'ish tamash betaga chalaf. And one who abuses the crown of Torah will surely perish. Right? There's a lot of death in the latter half here. All right. But essentially, it's sort of the bookend of the beginning, where one should be adding to one's knowledge and constantly learning, but one's learning should not be in order to flaunt one's knowledge or one's piety. That if you're really studying Torah properly, then you realize that Torah is an expression of God's love for us, which is meant to be reflected in our compassion for others. By the way, just to show you that in every generation, there's a new way of expressing this. I learned this term from some of my yeshiva friends who had to explain it to me because I did not understand the import of it when they first introduced the term. Right? Do you know what a tefillin date is?
Fill in date.
Yes, a tefillin date. All right. I will tell you that it is not a scheduled meeting with the scribe to have your tefillin checked. Okay? A tefillin date is how you would talk about going on a date where you anticipated not sleeping at home.
I didn't make that connection.
Oh, it's simple. I need to have my tefillin with me in the morning when I daven. I don't expect to be in my home when I wake up in the morning. Therefore, I need to take my tefillin with me. Therefore, I'm going out on a date and I'm taking my wallet and I'm taking my tefillin with me so that I can pray in the morning when I wake up not in my own home.
Okay.
I will let you make the rest of that connection for yourselves, right? But on one level, it is the perfect example of I am going to tout my impiety and wrap it in a cloth of piety. You see, I am so pious that I'm planning ahead for when I'm not where I'm supposed to be in the morning because I was somewhere else where I really wasn't supposed to be. But I'm pious, so I bring my tefillin with me so that I should have them in the morning.
And your seat, right?
Well, assuming that in the Orthodox world, most people wear, if not, if they're not married yet, they wear a seat all the time.
Yet the very paragraph that talks about seats says, something that your eyes are led astray and so on and so forth. So you're kind of really just.
Yeah. I mean,
I know you're not defending the practice.
I am not in any way defending it. I'm just saying that the existence of that terminology is a reflection of how one can attempt to dress in piety what is still inappropriate behavior. Right. So let us stop there. And we will pick up next week with the third and final of the statements of Hillel in Avot here. It is kind of famous, this last one. But I have a little bit of a twist on it, thanks to Rabbi Judah Golden and a commentary he wrote. So that's my teaser for next time.
Thank you, Rabbi.